up everybody? Welcome to your first geography video. So this is going to be the basics of thinking geographically. The first thing that I want to talk about today is how to look at the world through a geographic lens. There's going to be a lot of definitions in this, and don't forget you can always pause the video to get those definitions down or make sure you understand what I'm talking about. So the first way to look through a geographic lens is to understand that there are two different types of geography. The first is physical geography, the study of spatial characteristics of various elements of the physical environment, like weather and climate, ecosystems and biomes, and then, volcanoes, erosion, things like that. Things that have to do with our immediate physical environment. The next is human geography, the study of spatial characteristics of humans and human activities. A couple of divisions of human geography that might help you understand it a little better are like population, health, births, migrations, things like that. And then culture, language, religion, popular music. Economics, like agriculture, level of development. How developed is a country? Is it doing well? Is it not doing well? Wealth distribution, things like that. Urban areas like cities, suburbs, challenges from growth. And then politics, local government, nations, distributions of power. These are all things that go into human geography. Now, I've used a term a couple of times now, and you might not be sure what I meant by it. And it's the word spatial. And in everything in geography, I want you to take a spatial perspective. Now, I'm going to define that, and then I'm going to tell you what it means. Spatial perspective is a way of identifying, explaining, and predicting the human physical patterns in space and the interconnectedness of various spaces. Now, if you're wondering why I do these videos, it's because of terms precisely like this, because there's a very good chance you don't know what I meant whenever I just said that. So let me define it in another way, in a way that's maybe a little bit more student friendly. The spatial perspective is essentially asking, why is that there and why does it matter? How does the way that people use their space, what does that tell you about them? To sort of give you an example of what I mean by spatial perspective, think of the way that you decorate your room or lay out your room. It could be that you've got a sibling and you two have rooms next to each other that are basically the same as far as the house is concerned, but when you walk into those rooms, you want that room to communicate something about you. If someone were to walk in your room and they see a bunch of posters of your favorite band, you're trying to communicate, hey, I have this much space on my wall and I used it to talk about my favorite band. That tells you that I really, really like music in this band in particular. Whereas if you have a brother or sister and maybe they're a little bit more studious, you walk into their room and rather than having posters up, they've got a desk that has a computer with all of their work on it. That would communicate instantly, okay, look, I have the same amount of space as someone else, but I used it in this way, and that tells you something about me. So we take the spatial perspective to understand, okay, cities and people in general, how they use space matters, and how they use space tells you something about them. Now, really quick, I'm going to go through the terms that you need to know. If I were to spend all day on these terms, this video would be very, very long. But instead, I'm trying to keep it short. So remember to pause and just remember these are a basic explanation of your definitions. The first big term that you're going to need to know is absolute location. Absolute location is the precise spot where something is. You can determine an absolute location by looking at latitude and longitude. Now, to tell you what latitude and longitude are, in case you don't know, latitude is the distance north or south of the equator. It's always best to remember latitude, ladder, going up, going up. The equator is an imaginary line that circles the globe exactly halfway between the north and south poles. The equator is exactly 0 degrees latitude. Now, longitude is the distance east or west of the prime meridian, an imaginary line that runs from pole to pole through Greenwich, England. It is designated as 0 degrees. That was absolute location. Your absolute location is precisely where you are on a map or in a given area at any time. Your address is your absolute location. Mr. McIntyre's classroom in the front row in the middle is your absolute location. Your relative location is a description of where you are in relation to other things. Relative location is like, hey, Mr. McIntyre, where is that class? Oh, it's down there. Or where is your house? Take a right and keep an eye out for the Wendy's and you'll find it. That's relative location. Relative location is determined by how well two locations are tied together by roads or other links. And then accessibility is how quickly and easily people in one location can interact with people in another location. For example, some places are a lot more accessible than others. If you go to certain towns in Louisiana, you're going to be cut off from most of the world because there aren't cell phone towers around, you can't communicate, and there certainly aren't people around. Whereas if you go to New Orleans, you're kind of connected to everything because there are people all over. That's a very, very densely populated city. Now, a couple of quick terms, and these are a little bit easier than those. Space refers to the physical gap or interval between two objects. Basically, how far apart are we? What's the space between us? Place is your location or something's location. This one's easy. Now, flows. This is movement. The flow of people, the flow of goods, money, ideas, or materials between locations near or far. How do things flow? Now, distance decay. This one is interesting. Distance decay is the idea that the farther away you are from goods and services, the less likely you are to make use of this. For example, if you live in Slidell, it's very, very unlikely that you would go to the Walmart in Covington, or vice versa. If you live in Covington, it's very unlikely you would go to the Walmart in Slidell because you have a Walmart here. Distance decay is important, and it's an idea that really we understand. Maybe you just don't know the name for it. It's the reason why most of us have never had a lot of the food that they eat up north. It's the reason why somebody living in Minnesota has probably never had a po' boy. They don't have a lot of access to a po' boy. There's distance decay between them and the po' boy. But this is where time-space compression comes into play. The idea of the increasing sense of connectivity that seems to be bringing people closer together in our world. So using the po' boy as an example, somebody from Minnesota could look up a recipe for a po' boy. Or a great example of distance decay would actually be us right now. So over the weekend, there's a chance that you might say, oh, Mr. McIntyre, I didn't see you this weekend, and thus I was more excited to come to your class. At least I hope. But right now, through time-space compression, what we're doing is, because you have internet and you're able to see this video, you are feeling a little bit closer to me than otherwise you would have. So now you're like, goodness, Mr. McIntyre, it hasn't been long enough since I saw you. That distance decay is reduced because of time-space compression. Now look, I know that's a lot, but that's why we do these videos, so that you can get a little preview for the week and get a head start on all this new terminology. All right, thanks you guys.